There are two main ways I use the Adepta Sororitas Canoness, as a leader within a unit of infantry, or as a wandering character completing primary and secondary missions. We're talking about the Canoness on foot, not the jump pack Canoness. She has her own video. The two abilities of our walking Canoness really help to illustrate the two ways of using her. Ability 1 is Sacred Command. Once per battle round, one unit from your army with this ability can use it when its unit is targeted with a stratagem. Reduce the command point cost to use that stratagem by 1. This isn't a when leading a unit ability, it is just your unit. So that could be when you're by yourself, it works. When you're part of an attached unit, that is your unit. Strong stratagems can become cheaper, 2 command point stratagems become affordable, and 1 command point stratagems are effectively free. The ability doesn't stop at 1. You can go to a cost of 0 command points. So your 1 command point stratagems are free, once per battle round. That is used in addition to any ability that gives you more command points, like Junith or discarding a secondary mission in the Pariah Nexus or Leviathan mission decks. Having the ability to use most stratagems for free on your unit means that you can do it whenever you need to. And if you get to the end of a battle round, you will be able to use a stratagem without caring, because you might as well praise the fallen, or go to ground, or use those grenades. Maybe use grenades with forethought. It is hard for the sisters to destroy enemy vehicles and monsters, a few extra mortal wounds helps. But as soon as you're using a stratagem on the Canoness's unit, use the Sacred Command ability. Because the rule refers to being able to use this ability once per battle round, you can't do it more than once, even if you have more than one Canoness. And the Canoness with a jump pack has the exact same ability with the same name. So you won't be doing this more than once per battle round across your army. That's suggesting you only want one Canoness. If you are looking at your Adepta Sororitas 10th edition codex and the words are different to the rule I read out, there have been balance patches to the rules. What I read out is the correct version for right now, at time of recording. We have previously seen these abilities change to only affect battle tactic stratagems, or working on giving you a free second use of a stratagem, and so on. Warpedia is a good resource for giving you the most up-to-date version. But I want you to know that with Warpedia, the Canoness with jump pack's ability is listed as rites of battle, like a Space Marine captain. It should be Sacred Command, same as the Canoness on foot. It is the same ability with the same name. Depending on how often it is updated, the 40k app can also work if you bought the codex and you entered the code to see the unit rules. So while that ability can be used by the Canoness when she's by herself, it will affect her unit, so when she's in a unit, any of the stratagems that can be used on the unit can be used for 1 command point cheaper. We'll be looking at some particularly good stratagems a bit later on. Ability 2 is the Emperor's Grace. Once per battle, at the start of any phase, you can use this ability. If it does, that model and only that model, not every model in the unit, gets a 2+ invulnerable save. That is the best possible save to have in the game. There are 2 problems with it. You have to use it at the start of a phase, not when an enemy declares an attack against you. So if your Canoness's unit and another sister's unit were in combat with the same enemy monster, they may choose to attack the non-Canoness unit, but you would still have to declare whether you're using your ability or not at the start of the phase. And it's not great when you're within a squad, as you don't know if all of your bodyguard is going to die, and then you may have used your ability pointlessly. Having 20 orcs attack your 5 sisters plus Canoness might give you an idea that you're going to lose 5 sisters, but you don't know. If the enemy has precision attacks, like it's a lictor, you declare you are using the ability at the start of the phase, but the enemy does not have to assign any attacks to the Canoness and could hit the bodyguard instead, thus waiting out your ability. Of course, if you decided not to trigger it, then the lictor could stab your Canoness and you don't get the invuln save, just her regular 4+ invulnerable save. A Canoness acting alone can trigger it better. If she is charged by an enemy unit, you pop it, you survive, and fight off the enemy, or at least survive until the next turn. So there are 2 different ways based on the 2 different abilities. Do we want to have the Canoness in a unit, or do we want to have the Canoness acting alone? If you're going to have a Canoness in a unit, which unit? Celestian Sacrosants are a pretty good option. I mean, the Celestian Sacrosants also go well with a Palatine or a Hospitaller. Celestian Sacrosants are not an amazing unit because they're very expensive per model and very squishy. It is a Battle Sister profile with a 4+ invulnerable save, something that Battle Sisters can get within a Magifier. But when the Celestian Sacrosants are joined by a character, then the unit is -1 to be wounded. though often this will mean that the common strength 4 weapons are now wounding you on a 4+, something that they're expecting to wound on against most enemies because Space Marine profiles are the most common to see in games of 40k. Strength 4 and Toughness 4 is very common to see. But that Sworn Protector's ability will make the Canoness a bit harder to kill, just by having the Canoness in the unit. If you have Celestian Sacrosancts with a Canoness, the Mauls are the best weapons to go for. They are lethal hits, they are 2 damage importantly, and as we just said, Space Marine profiles are very common. Having 2 wounds and a Toughness 4 means you can wound those Space Marines on a 4+, and then kill them immediately, because you are damage 2 to their 2 wounds. The Canoness doesn't have any spectacular ranged weapons, she has better combat weapons, so being with a unit that's very combat focused can work well, and then the Celestian unit can use stratagems for free or for cheaper. The Canoness can join Battle Sisters or Dominions. The Dominions will get up the board faster, however, if you join the Dominions they won't be able to scout unless you put the Canoness and Dominions in the transport. Then because of the Dominions rule, the Canoness would get the Scout 6 ability and the dedicated transport would still scout. But both of these are units that are better with shooting. There are stratagems that can enhance that, but the Canoness has very little in the way of shooting. She has a Condemner bolt gun as her longest ranged option. The Battle Sister and Dominion Superiors can have a Condemner bolt gun. It's not that special. It's the same profile, but the Canoness is hitting on a 2+ instead of a 3+. Now that we're in the Codex, the Canoness can join Retributors, something that she couldn't do in the Index. There are some stratagems that will help the Retributors. However, the Retributors are extremely expensive per weapon. 25 points per sister, and only 4 of them have heavy weapons, and in that case, you're going to want multi-melters. And if you're taking multi-melters, Astrid and Agatha are going to be a better option, or a Dialogus instead of the Canoness. The Canoness can join Novitiates, but if she does, the Novitiates won't be able to infiltrate. The Novitiates will let the Canoness reroll all hit rolls, however the Rod of Office that the Canoness can be equipped with lets you reroll hit rolls of 1 for the Bearer's unit, so we already have that ability, we don't need to duplicate it. The Banner of the Novitiates will help the Canoness to succeed at charges because you can reroll the charge roll with that banner, but when it comes to Novitiates, a Palatine is a better choice because the Palatine gives them lethal hits, and then their ability to reroll hit rolls when attacking an enemy on an objective means you can get lethal hits, something that the Canoness cannot provide unless you were in one of the detachments that has a stratagem that lets you have lethal hits, then you could use that stratagem for free. So it can work, but as a combat unit for the Canoness, the Sacrosancts are going to work better. The last option is the unit of Crusaders. If you can't see the Crusaders in your Codex, that's because their rules are not found in the Codex. They're free to download from the Warhammer community website, in the Downloads tab, in the Legends tab, in the Adepta Sororitas section. And they're not found on the Games Workshop app, even though on the Games Workshop's Age of Sigmar app, Legends units are included. But we can talk about Legends in a different video, which is linked up there. It doesn't add much to the Canoness to have a couple of Crusaders, there's not many stratagems that they want to use. But you could buy a unit of 5 Celestian Sacrosancts, turn 4 of them into Crusaders, and the final one into a Canoness character. If you want to buy Celestian Sacrosancts, a Canoness model, or any other unit, I have affiliates. It is cheaper to get your Games Workshop models through them than going through Games Workshop. I really recommend converting a model to be a Canoness instead of buying a single Canoness model. Single character models from Games Workshop are the smallest amount of plastic you can get for the most amount of money ratio. The Novitiate box gives you all of the characters you need. That's all the bits there. The Superior makes a great Canoness. Rebasing is then optional. I don't care about base size. Some people think it is the most important thing, and not following Games Workshop's current base size is breaking commandment. I have a fun video on that. But I recommend converting your own Canoness. So any unit, a Canoness is a force multiplier, she gets a bodyguard to get her into combat, she's not going to die immediately from random shots because she has ablative sisters to support her. Alone, there are no sisters, but there are lots of reasons to take the Canoness alone. And just because a character has the leader keyword does not mean you have to put them in a unit. As you can see from the Leviathan starter set, there are characters that operate alone because there are no units they can join, like the Apothecary Biologus in that set. Alone, a Canoness is a relatively cheap character that can move around the board, stand on objectives to hold them if you don't have Battle Sisters to do that, and she can stay behind or move up to a place and complete secondary missions. At 50 points, that is cheaper than having a unit of Battle Sisters at 105 points do the same thing. The Canoness is one of the best units to do this with compared to a lone Ministorum Priest or a lone Dialogus because of that ability, the Emperor's Grace, which gives you the 2+ invulnerable save. In some games, you will be standing in the open with lots of guns pointed at you, and you will trigger the 2+ invulnerable save at the start of the enemy shooting phase, and then all of the enemy guns will shoot elsewhere. At that point, rather than joining the crickets and making screaming noises for 6 weeks, accept that the 2+ invulnerable save has kept your Canoness safe from harm. In a way. If there is an action that only completes at the end of your opponent's turn, the Canoness is perfect for doing that. You can still use your unit abilities, and that doesn't stop your action from succeeding. With something like a Blessed Blade, the Canoness can go around killing lone operatives and enemy characters that are doing the same thing as her, completing missions. However, a jump pack Canoness is going to be faster, so is Ephriel Stern, who has the lone operative keyword, which means she can't be shot outside of 12 inches. The jump Canoness can have more attacks, Ephriel Stern always has fight first. At that point, you need to consider, when acting alone, would a different unit be better? Could I have some Archoflagellants or some Crusaders instead? But that 2+ invulnerable save means it is a very valid way to run a Canoness, just as a lone character, doing her own thing. So how should we equip this Canoness? It's going to depend on how you're running her, whether with a unit or by herself. And the rules for the Canoness's equipment are a mess, because the Canoness is split across 2 different models. The monopose model that came in the Combat Patrol and 8th edition reintroduction of the Battle Sisters starter set, that is a Canoness with a power sword, a plasma pistol, which you can see slightly behind the cloak, and a Rod of Office. So that is the final war gear option. Plasma pistol, power weapon, and Rod of Office. That is the only way to get a Rod of Office. So if you want the Rod of Office, you cannot also have a Blessed Blade or an Inferno pistol. The other options come from the multi-part Canoness kit. One of the hands has the ranged weapon. The bolt pistol can be swapped for a Condemner bolt gun, Inferno pistol, or plasma pistol. Any of those are good. The Condemner bolt gun is very useful if you have a miracle dice of a 6 and need to cause 1 wound. It has devastating wounds, so you could use a 6 to make that wound roll a 6. Devastating wounds gets through enemy toughness and invulnerable saves and armor saves. You will do 1 wound unless the enemy has a feel no pain. The plasma pistol is 12-inch range, that's decent. It is strength 7 and 1 damage, or you can overcharge it for strength 8 and damage 2, with AP -3. Then you risk taking damage, but as the Canoness has 4 wounds, she can lose 3 wounds from a failed hazardous test and still be alive. And in the Hallowed Martyrs detachment, this would mean she gets +1 to hit and +1 to wound in future. So you can push the plasma pistol to be the same strength as the Inferno pistol, which is only 6-inch range. However, the Inferno pistol is very useful if you survive an enemy's combat attacks. Then on your turn, you fire the Melter pistol at point blank range. Strength 8, AP -4, and damage D3 +2 from the Melter rule, assuming you are within 3 inches, which if you are in engagement range, you should be within 3 inches of the enemy. So any of those shooting weapons are good. The other hand of the multi-part model is the combat weapon. That can be a chainsword, blessed blade, or power weapon. Or you can have some extra war gear, in which case you use a different backpack which has the chainsword in a holder on the backpack, so you have to be equipped with a chainsword, and then you can also have a brazier of holy fire or a null rod. There are not really any bad options. I don't think this is a unit you're going to build wrong, but it depends what unit you are leading. If you're leading a unit of Battle Sisters, you could have a Condemner bolt gun and a null rod. That will give you a 4+ feel no pain against mortal wounds and psychic attacks. That is something, and the Condemner bolt gun is the same range as the Battle Sisters bolt guns. That is probably the worst you can do. In a squad of Battle Sisters, I prefer to have a combat weapon so that if the unit ends up in combat, you have a surprise Canoness with a lot of damaging attacks from a Blessed Blade. Or you can support the Battle Sisters by having the Power Sword and the Rod of Office. Then the Battle Sister unit can reroll hit rolls of 1, and you have a decent combat weapon, 4 attacks at strength 4, importantly damage 2. If you're in a squad of Celestian Sacrosancts, the Rod of Office and the Power Weapon are probably the best thing as well. You have those damage 2 attacks, so you know if you're facing Space Marines, well, Chaos Space Marines, we'll say Chaos Space Marines, could be Space Wolves. They're pretty heretical looking. Then your Celestians will reroll hit rolls of 1, and you have a decent combat weapon to support them. If the Canoness is acting alone, the Rod of Office is far less useful. It will still help her reroll hit rolls of 1 for herself when she's hitting on a 2+, but that is not as effective as what it could be if you're within a unit. So I would take the Blessed Blade instead, which has the same number of attacks as the power weapon, with lethal hits and strength 6. You cannot have a Rod of Office and a Blessed Blade. So it would just be the Blessed Blade and a cool gun of your choice, like a plasma pistol, an Inferno pistol, or Condemn a bolt gun. Having the best combat weapon and an okay shooting weapon means you can attack enemy characters and have a decent chance of killing them. Which way you use the Canoness, either alone or within a unit, can also depend on the detachment. Either way works, and you can have more than one Canoness, one in a unit, one acting alone, but you won't be able to use the Sacred Command ability more than once per battle round regardless of the number of Canonesses you have. In the Hallowed Martyrs, there are a lot of strange stratagems that means that a lot of people run their characters by themselves. I have seen some Hallowed Martyrs army lists that are just characters by themselves and vehicles. It's an option, but it doesn't quite look like a Battle Sisters army. But acting alone, whether in a weird list or a normal looking list, the Canoness can survive with the Emperor's Grace. If she gets attacked in a different phase, then she may die but return with Divine Intervention. If she has the enhancement Saintly Example, then when she dies she generates D3 additional Miracle Dice. Miracle Dice are a very valuable resource to have. And when you bring her back with Divine Intervention, yeah, you spend 1 Miracle Dice, but you always gain 1 Miracle Dice, so it's D3 plus 1 with Saintly Example. She returns to the battle, she isn't able to use Emperor's Grace again, but when she's killed once more, that is another D3 plus 1 Miracle Dice. You could instead have the Mantle of Ophelia, so that attacks against her had changed to damage 1. There's no way she can be taken out by a single las cannon shot. And acting alone, we have one more stratagem that is very effective, the Suffering and Sacrifice stratagem. So get into combat, which may be through heroic intervention if the enemy charged on your turn. Use the Suffering and Sacrifice stratagem. One of those 2 stratagems is going to be free on the Canoness. With Suffering and Sacrifice, enemy models that can attack her must attack her. If you charge an enemy monster, then all of its attacks will be going against her 2+ invulnerable save. Fulgrim is far less happy when his attacks are forced to land on the strong invulnerable save instead of on the Repentia. The Repentia could then go on to do immense damage to him. Of course, in the Hallowed Martyrs you are not forced to have the Canoness work alone, but she works best alone here compared to any other detachment. In the Army of Faith, you could have a Canoness operate alone and have the triptych of the Macarian Crusade. When you spend Miracle Dice on a saving throw, any Miracle Dice is a success, even a 1. If you might die from failing 1 of your invulnerable saves, before you roll that last dice, substitute any Miracle Dice. But in the Army of Faith, I want my Canoness leading a unit. It could be Sacrosancts, it could be Battle Sisters. There are 3 really good stratagems that you definitely want to use for free. Blinding Radiance is 1. When an enemy attacks your unit, you are at -1 to be hit. That works in shooting or combat. So in a unit of Celestian Sacrosancts, your unit could be -1 to be hit and -1 to be wounded. But the 2 stratagems I prefer to use in your own turn, or the combat phase, is Divine Guidance, which increases the armor penetration of your attacks by 1 for all the models in your unit, and Faith and Fury, which gives you Lance, that is +1 to wound on a turn in which you charged. Those 2 are important because if your unit attacks and kills any enemy model, you gain a Miracle Dice. Think about it this way. It's free to use the stratagem. You get a Miracle Dice. It's free Miracle Dice. So we like the Canoness with our units in the Army of Faith. This will still work if she's acting alone, but she needs to kill at least 1 enemy model. That is easier when you have more bodies with you. In the Penitent host, I would have her join a unit. Because of the potential to use the Emperor's Grace, it is easier to keep the Canoness alive than any of your other characters, and so having her with the Psalm of Righteous Judgment means that she will stay alive on the battlefield, and then each time an enemy unit is destroyed by a Penitent unit, you can discard a Miracle Dice and get a Miracle Dice of a 6. Or with Catechism of Divine Penitence, the Canoness can join a Repentia squad. This is the only way to have any character join the Repentia. And as the Canoness gains the Penitent keyword, the detachment rule and the stratagems will affect her. Then with Boundless Zeal, you are falling back and shooting and charging. With Lash of Guilt, you can advance and charge. Very important for getting your unit into combat, because the Penitent units are squishy, especially the Repentia. If you want to keep them alive, hey, we have free Purity of Suffering, a 4+ Feel No Pain, on all of the models, including the Canoness. So if she was targeted by precision, you could have unit-wide Purity of Suffering. Then yeah, probably use the Emperor's Grace as well, just to be safe, but you're gonna live. Any of those stratagems becoming free is wonderful. In the Bringers of Flame detachment, you could have the Canoness going alone, then she can have the Iron Surplus, which gives her a 2+ save and a 5+ Feel No Pain. That keeps her alive to keep operating as a lone person, not lone operative, but a lone person, completing missions, standing on objectives, and being able to hold them against enemy shooting attacks. Or combat attacks. And it's a very cheap enhancement at 10 points. If you wanted, you could have Righteous Rage, then you could discard a bunch of Miracle Dice, but you could get your Blessed Blade up to Strength 9 with 7 attacks. Now you're in the potential area of stabbing a tank to death. In a unit of Battle Sisters, you could use Shield of Aversion for free, then the Battle Sisters can ignore 1 point of armor penetration. It's a good defensive stratagem, which means if you come to the enemy turn, you haven't used your Sacred Command ability this battle round, use it on that. If your Canoness was leading a group of Celestian Sacrosants, you could use Righteous Blows for free. Then they have lethal hits if they were equipped with halberds, though I would prefer them to be equipped with mauls anyway. And the Bringers of Flame detachment does not want combat units, it wants shooting units. So if your Canoness joined Dominions or Retributors who had the Flamers, then Torrent weapons could cause devastating wounds. That 2 command point stratagem becomes 1 command point, a much more reasonable amount of command points. And lastly, in the Champions of Faith, as there are 5 detachments available to the Adepta Sororitas right now, you will almost certainly want to be adding the Canoness to a unit of Celestian Sacrosants. Celestian Sacrosants get a bonus in this detachment. If you spend the Miracle Dice to make them righteous, you get 1 extra inch of movement, your leadership is improved by 1, the Celestian Sacrosants improve their weapon skill and ballistic skill by 1, and as long as they're not battle shocked, they have 1 higher objective control, making them on a similar level to Battle Sisters. In the Champions of Faith detachment, when spending Miracle Dice, I prefer to spend those Miracle Dice on Paragon Warsuits, because many of the stratagems require you to have spent Miracle Dice on the unit to make them righteous. But since we're spending Miracle Dice already to have permission to use some of these stratagems, let's not pay twice and use our Canoness in Celestian Sacrosants so that at least the stratagems are free. Suffer Not the Unfaithful gives you lethal hits or sustained hits, so whichever weapon the Celestian Sacrosants have, give it the other ability. If it's the mauls, give it sustained hits. If it's the halberds, give it lethal hits. Use Bastion of Faith for free, which could affect 2 Celestian Sacrosant units instead of just 1. But I generally do not recommend having more than 1 Celestian Sacrosant unit, even in the Champions of Faith, because I see that as a Paragon Warsuit detachment, not so much the Take Loads of Celestian Sacrosants detachment. Or another cool stratagem, To the Heart of Heresy. Improve the strength and AP of attacks by 1. That will work on the Canoness because she's in the unit that's using the stratagem. And the whole unit gets made righteous when you spend a Miracle Dice on them. Attached units are 1 unit for like all purposes. Almost all purposes. But any of the stratagems being free is good. And if you weren't able to be righteous because you didn't have the Miracle Dice, just throw some grenades. That works. The thing to consider with all of these enhancements and the abilities and the stratagems is twofold. If your Canoness character is acting alone, for the price of the enhancement, you may have reached the 75 points between the enhancement cost and the Canoness's cost of 50 points, and now you may be at the cost of a jump Canoness. She is 75 points at time of recording. She is faster. She has more power because there's a once per game ability to have extra attacks and devastating wounds, though she is lacking the 2+ invulnerable save ability. But you have to consider, for the points I'm paying, do I want to jump Canoness instead? When thinking about the enhancements, would they be better on any other character? A lot of the combat enhancements I didn't mention because you want to have them on a Palatine. She is 50 points, the same as a Canoness, and has the ability to cause mortal wounds. The more attacks she has, you can cause exponentially more damage. So I'm going to leave this video here. That is how to use the Canoness, whether you want her in a unit or acting alone. The next video is how you can make your Palatine much better, especially with the combat focus enhancements. So take a look at that next, and have a great day of 40k.